Hi, I'm Bakhtiar Sanov and you are watching AnewZ Weekend. Let's see the headlines. AnewZ investigation reveals new details about the Azerbaijan Airlines flight crash. U.S. President Donald Trump arrived in California to tour disaster zone affected by the wildfires. Three-story building collapsed in Turkey's Konya province. AnewZ investigation has revealed new details about the Azerbaijan Airlines Flight 8243 crash. Sources indicate that the aircraft was brought down by a missile and those responsible have been identified. Azerbaijan insists on full accountability and is prepared to take legal action if necessary. Here is the latest.
As the investigation into the Azerbaijan Airlines Flight 8243 crash continues, new findings emerging from Russian sources suggest that the aircraft was shot down by a Pantsir S-1 air defense system, which had been brought to Russia from Syria. According to reliable sources familiar with the investigation, Russian officials have also determined that electronic warfare systems were deployed against the Azerbaijani aircraft, leading to severe malfunctions in its control systems before the crash. Sources indicate that Russian investigators have identified both the individual who launched the missile and the official who gave the order. However, it remains unclear whether Moscow will publicly disclose their names or attempt to evade responsibility. AnewZ is actively working to verify the authenticity of the names we obtained. Diplomatic sources confirm that Azerbaijan refuses to allow the case to be hushed up and remains resolute in its demand for accountability. Should Russia attempt to avoid responsibility, Baku intends to take the matter to international courts to ensure justice for the victims. The latest revelations align with Azerbaijan's initial findings, which pointed to an external explosion as the likely cause of the crash. High-resolution images and forensic analysis from the crash site indicated that the damage was consistent with a missile strike, not an internal malfunction. In a previous statement, Azerbaijan's Minister of Digital Development and Transport, Rashad Nabiev, noted that preliminary investigation results had already ruled out any technical failure or pilot error, reinforcing the missile strike theory. Azerbaijani President İlham Aliyev also made Azerbaijan's position clear.
Bugün biz tam açıkaydı. Diyebiliriz ki Rusya tarafından terör vuruldu.
We can clearly say today that the plane was shot down by Russia. This is a fact, and no one can deny this fact. Again, we are not saying that this was done intentionally, but it was done. We have clearly expressed our demands to the Russian side. These demands were officially communicated to them on the 27th of December. What do these demands consist of? First of all, the Russian side must apologize to Azerbaijan. Secondly, it must acknowledge its guilt. Thirdly, those responsible must be punished, brought to criminal responsibility, and compensation must be paid to the Azerbaijani state, to the injured passengers and crew members. These are our conditions.
And now let's have a look back at survivors' testimonies. Here is the story of a stewardess and a passenger who shared their account of the final moments of the tragic flight.
There were two explosions outside the plane and shrapnel fell into the plane's cabin. These are the words of Aydan Rahimli. She is a stewardess of Azerbaijani Airlines, one of the survivors of Baku-Grozny flight.
The plane was in good condition. There was no malfunction. It attempted to land at Grozny airport once, but it didn't succeed. It tried a second time, but again, it was unsuccessful. On the third attempt, the plane was struck from the left side. At that moment, oxygen masks dropped down.
After the explosion, chaos engulfed the plane cabin and the passengers panicked. Stewardess Aydan tried her best to calm them, but soon her fellow flight attendant got wounded.
We were trying to calm the passengers and telling them not to unfasten their seatbelts. Then, we heard the sound of an explosion, and a second strike occurred. After the second strike, our flight attendant, Mr. Zulfagar, was injured in the arm. I provided first aid and gave him water. Those moments were very stressful because he could have lost a lot of blood, and it was necessary to stop the bleeding.
And that is when emergency landing was announced by pilots, and lead flight attendant Hükümet started to give instructions to cabin crew and passengers.
Lead stewardess asked, "Do you know what to do as a first aid?" And I said yes. She said, "Okay, then we are making an emergency landing, but it should have been a normal emergency landing." We did not know what's going to happen. Ms. Hükümet explained to the passengers all the necessary information about the situation. She said, "Everything is going to be fine."
Aydan says she was at the very back of the plane, at the place of service of flight attendants. In the last minutes, she only saw the passengers who were in the brace position, according to emergency landing rules.
The plane continued to fly, searching for a place to land. It wasn't working. It kept ascending and descending. The most tragic moments were at the very end. At that moment, the plane started rapidly descending. We were all seated, removed the mask, and tightened our seatbelts. I lowered my head and sat in the brace position. The plane was still descending. Then I was thrown to the right, then to the left. The seatbelt held me in place. When I opened my eyes, the plane was upside down.
Seatbelts fastened stewardess to her seat, and she stayed there until very end. Aydan Rahimli says they did not know where they landed. When she got out of plane, people were already there to help, and it was then Aydan heard that they are in Aktau, Kazakhstan. Stewardess of Azal says it is a miracle that half of the people survived the crash. One of these survivors already recorded his last-minute prayers. Passenger Supankul Rahimov said he had begun to recite prayers and prepare for the end after hearing the bang.
I wasn't even sure that I would stay alive. I already thought that it was all over. After the bang, I already got my mindset that something bad would happen now, because it was clear that the plane had received damage. I was conscious when I felt the impact. I was being thrown back and forth. It all lasted for a few seconds, and then silence. Everything was quiet, and I realized that was it. We had landed.
Eventually, Baku-Grozny flight had landed. For some, it was the last destination, while for the others, Aktau will be a place of rebirth to the second life.
U.S. President Donald Trump arrived in California to survey the areas affected by the wildfires. Trump also vowed to sign executive orders to support the fight against natural disasters.
United States President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump have paid a visit to California to survey the devastation caused by the multiple wildfires. Trump was welcomed by California's governor, who accompanied him for an aerial tour of the fire-affected areas. President Trump described the aftermath of the fires as devastating and vowed to sign an executive order channeling water towards Los Angeles for assistance.
It is devastation. It's incredible. It's really an incineration. Even some of the chimneys came down, okay? When you have the chimneys come down, you know that's pretty hot stuff, and a lot of them were down. That was a bad sign, too.
The U.S. president also promised to sign an executive order to overhaul the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which is the main federal agency that responds to natural disasters, saying he prefers that states be given federal money to handle disasters themselves.
I do have to say FEMA is a big disappointment. We had it working well. We had great people, but FEMA's not good anymore. What FEMA did in North Carolina, you know, they still haven't even gone to certain areas. They don't know what they're doing. And I say, you don't need FEMA. You need a good state government. And when you have a problem in Los Angeles, or when you have a problem even in the state of California, you have your own, essentially FEMA. You fix it yourself. FEMA is a very expensive, in my opinion, mostly failed situation. We had great people, we did some great jobs, but each state should take care of their problem and get money from the federal government. It would be so much better, so much more efficient. So we're looking at that.
Trump has, in recent comments, criticized California's response to the Los Angeles fires. However, he's pledged to work with local authorities to help rebuild the city. Meanwhile, a new wildfire, the Hughes Fire, broke out north of Los Angeles on Wednesday, prompting mandatory evacuations for over 31,000 people. While some rain is expected soon, it may bring further risks, including mudslides in fire-affected areas, raising concerns about further damage.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has expressed a willingness to meet with US President Donald Trump to discuss issues like the Ukraine war and energy prices. Putin, speaking on Russian TV, described Trump as pragmatic and emphasized the need for direct talks on shared concerns. He noted challenges in negotiating with Ukraine due to President Zelensky's ban on talks with Russia. Putin added that future discussions depend on United States decisions, but reiterated Russia's readiness for dialogue. Moscow says no deal on Ukraine is possible without international guarantees that Kiev will not seek NATO membership. Dasha Chernyshova brings more on that from Moscow.
Moscow says it will seek international legal guarantees that would exclude Ukraine's NATO membership. That's according to Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Alexander Grushko. The diplomat says this is one of the key elements of a possible agreement on the conflict in Ukraine and would address the root causes of this conflict. He claims that in 2025, NATO will test the deployment of forces in Europe to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia. However, Grushko added that Moscow has enough technical and military means to ensure its safety in any developments of this situation and in any scenario. His comments come as US President Donald Trump threatened Moscow with more sanctions if it rejects a deal on Ukraine. The Kremlin said there was nothing new in such threats and reiterated its openness to dialogue. President Trump also said that the OPEC Plus alliance of oil exporting countries shares responsibility for nearly 3 years of conflict in Ukraine because it has kept oil prices too high. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov responded, saying that the situation in Ukraine does not depend on the cost of oil. Peskov also says that the Kremlin is ready for signals from the United States regarding talks and says the ball is in the Americans' court, insisting that Russia has never rejected the talks. He says Russia considers it's necessary to resume negotiations with Washington on disarmament issues because Moscow believes this is in the interest of the entire world and the peoples of the two countries. Sergei Shoigu, Russia's former defense minister and now secretary of the Security Council, said on Friday that against the backdrop of increasing conflict and aggravation of geopolitical rivalry in the world, the risks of a violent clash between major states, including with the participation of nuclear powers, are growing. Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow for AnewZ.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said that slashing Russia's export revenues, including oil, is key to establishing peace. Zelensky's remarks come after Donald Trump said the war will end immediately if OPEC lowers oil prices. Rose Callum reports.
Well, Donald Trump has made oil one of the key themes of his first week back in the presidency, saying during his inauguration speech on Monday, drill, baby, drill, wanting to boost domestic production. But he's also spoken about the global oil market, saying that if prices come down, Russia could potentially be pushed towards the negotiating table. That is certainly something with which the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky agrees, saying that by slashing Russian oil revenues, making Russian oil less financially attractive, that could be a key driver in reaching a peace agreement. Also on Friday, news coming out of South Korea that North Korea is preparing to send more troops to fight for and with the Russian armed forces against Ukraine. Pyongyang has already sent 12,000 soldiers, along with artillery and missiles, to Russia. Some 4,000 North Korean soldiers have died in the conflict, according to Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, and 2 North Korean prisoners of war are currently being held here in Ukraine. Also on North Korea, we understand that there are talks in Washington about trying to lay the groundwork for a possible phone call or meeting between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. Now, you might remember during his first term in office, there were two summits in 2018 and 2019 in Singapore and Vietnam between President Trump and the North Korean leader. So we could be seeing some of the groundwork put in place for a possible third meeting between the two leaders, influential players in the war in Ukraine, the United States an ally of Ukraine, and North Korea an ally of Russia. In terms of the latest attacks, according to the Ukrainian Air Force, overnight Thursday into Friday, Russia launched 58 Shahed drones towards Ukraine. 3 people died in a drone attack here in the Ukrainian capital region. 2 people lost their lives in Donetsk, and 1 person was killed in a drone attack in Kharkiv, which is Ukraine's second city. Ross Cullen for AnewZ in Kiev.
Tensions are rising in Slovakia as protests against Prime Minister Robert Fico's pro-Russian policies gain momentum. Tens of thousands of demonstrators fill the streets of Bratislava, demanding a return to a pro-European stance.
In Bratislava's Freedom Square, over 60,000 Slovaks gathered in a powerful display of discontent against Prime Minister Robert Fico's policy shift towards closer ties with Russia. Protesters waved banners, chanted slogans like "Enough of Fico" and "We are Europe," and lit up the square with mobile phones during a brief power outage. Organizers say this rally is one of the largest since Fico's re-election in 2023, with similar protests erupting in 20 cities nationwide. Fico's government has accused opposition groups of attempting to escalate the protests into illegal uprisings, even alleging foreign involvement similar to events in Ukraine and Georgia. However, opposition leaders dismiss these claims as baseless, arguing they're a distraction from the government's failures.
I am coming to the Slovakia Europe protest to show that we do not want to be with Russia, that we want to follow the policy that we have started. We want to be in the European Union. We want to be in NATO, and we want to stay that way, and we do not want to associate with the Russian Federation, and we want to continue to help Ukraine.
Just passing by, but I want to support a little bit this protest because I want Slovakia to get rid of this pro-Russian government, because they are real enemies of Slovakia and of its people. So it's a serious threat for people of Slovakia. That's why it's not my planned protest, but I want to support it. Indeed, because you can clearly see what happens when Russian world come to other countries, especially now in Ukraine. So it's very important to understand this, and especially for young people of Slovakia, it's very important to understand these enemies of Slovakia.
With tensions escalating, many fear these demonstrations could mirror the 2018 protests that forced Fico to resign. For now, the voices calling for a pro-European future grow louder as Slovakia's political crisis deepens.
Rescuers in Indonesia continue to search for survivors after a landslide in the country's central Java province killed at least 25 people. Torrential rain in Pekalongan caused a landslide on Tuesday on a main road connecting the city with a tourist area, the Dieng Plateau. 25 people were injured, and that heavy machinery was deployed to clear road access for search teams. The agency warned residents that rain was expected in the next few days, which could cause more landslides and flash floods. An official at the United Nations warned that insufficient funds threaten the ability to continue aid flows to Gaza.
A United Nations official says funding shortages may affect the UN's ability to maintain aid flows at target levels in Gaza. Daily aid deliveries have surged tenfold since the ceasefire deal took effect, surpassing the 600 trucks a day target set out for the first 7 weeks of the ceasefire. That's according to the United Nations. However, with hundreds of thousands of people left homeless and reliant on outside aid for survival after 15 months of war, the efforts to maintain aid is threatened by insufficient funds.
funding is an issue. We need immediate funding to make sure that we continue providing the aid for the 42 days, but also after the 42 days, because we're hopeful that we'll go from phase 1 to phase 2. So definitely we need more funding. We need to buy tents. We need to buy other humanitarian aid. There is a lot that needs to be done.
Immediate priorities for the people of Gaza include restocking hospital supplies, delivering food and repairing water networks. Difficulty in moving food and supplies through damaged streets has posed further challenges.
On challenges, there are a lot of people on the road moving, and the roads are destroyed. But that's something we were expecting. People going there, of course, in huge numbers, and increasing every day. And I think over the weekend, when they're able to move to the north, that is really going to become an issue, because how the road network there is. It's totally destroyed, of course.
The United Nations is seeking $4.1 billion for the Palestinian territories this year, with nearly 90% set to go to Gaza. Currently, 3.6% has been funded.
A three-story building collapsed in Konya province, central Turkey, prompting an immediate search and rescue operation. The incident occurred on Beyşehir Street in the Seljuk neighborhood, with witnesses promptly notifying authorities of the collapse. Disaster and Emergency Management Authority, emergency health and police teams were dispatched to the scene. While rescue efforts were continuing throughout the night, in a new development, 3 people were pulled out alive from the rubble of the collapsed building after about 5 hours of work. The injured rescued from the rubble were taken to hospital by ambulances. Meanwhile, the Konya Chief Public Prosecutor's Office announced an investigation into the collapse. A deputy chief prosecutor and 2 prosecutors were assigned to oversee a detailed examination of the site with expert teams. Rescue teams are actively working to locate those potentially trapped in the rubble. Turkey's defense industry is reshaping military strategies and redefining the global market. In 2024, the sector shattered records, achieving $7.15 billion in exports and securing its spot as the world's 11th largest defense exporter. With a localization rate exceeding 80%, Turkey's defense industry is becoming increasingly self-reliant, producing a wide array of advanced products such as unmanned aerial vehicles, smart munitions, naval platforms, and radar systems. These innovative solutions have found favor in 180 countries worldwide, with European nations leading the demand. Industry giants, the Aselsan and Roketsan, played a pivotal role, with Aselsan's cutting-edge Aselflir 500 system securing export deals in 16 countries. The sector also expanded its footprint in NATO and EU markets, delivering military vessels to Portugal and advancing contracts for unmanned systems. Looking ahead, Turkey's defense industry aims to surpass $10 billion in exports by 2026, continuing its trajectory as a vital player in global defense. Turkey's electric vehicle maker Tog will start pre-orders of the fully electric fastback sedan 10TF, which was presented at CES 2024 in Las Vegas last year. Fuat Tosyalı, chairman of the board at Tog, told Anadolu Agency that the T10F will be on pre-order after April-May. The Tog T10F features advanced driver assistance system that uses an online infrastructure to constantly receive updates, and it evolves. The T10F will be launched with 3 different configurations: a standard range model with a rear-wheel drive drivetrain, a long-range model, and an all-wheel drive dual-engine model. Tosyalı highlighted that the EV maker's sales in the European market will begin due to intense demand from the region, as well as rising production. According to him, the company has achieved a significant milestone, reaching 50,000 users in Turkey. Looking ahead, it aims to increase production to 60,000 units by the end of the year. Additionally, plans are underway to begin exporting to Europe, potentially starting in the final quarter of the year. The scientists have created tiny robotic insects to help with pollination in indoor vertical farms where honeybees cannot be used. These lightweight robots can hover for long periods, perform tricks and may boost crop yields in controlled farming. The findings were published in Science Robotics.
Scientists at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology have developed advanced robotic insects designed to assist with artificial pollination. These robots, particularly considered for controlled indoor environments like high-tech vertical farms, these tiny robots, lighter than a paperclip, can hover for 1,000 seconds, over 100 times longer than earlier models, and perform aerial tricks like double flips.
These type of robot will open up a very new types of use case. For instance, we can think of artificial pollination. So since our robot, is looks like an insect, and then it's very lightweight and small. If you can really precisely control the robot, we might be able to do something on top of flowers or leaves, which really requires very delicate interactions.
According to co-lead author Soo-Han Kim from MIT's Department of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science, this creation is not intended to replace natural pollinators like honeybees. Insect robots could be invaluable in indoor farming scenarios where honeybees cannot be used due to safety or environmental constraints.
So our approach is that we really start from building 0.1 gram, very lightweight artificial muscles that can be very power dense. So with that, we combine flapping wing structure to the muscle so that we can achieve very compact and lightweight flying robot system. So our newly reported robot weighs around 0.8 grams and has size about 4 centimeter by 4 centimeter square.
The team believes these robotic insects could increase crop yields in vertical farms where crops are grown in stacked layers under controlled conditions. This technology may help tackle food security challenges from population growth, climate change, and geopolitical issues.
We were able to achieve around 100 times longer flight time, and from that we were also able to conduct a number of flight tests which enabled us to achieve more and more precise trajectory tracking as well as very aggressive maneuvers such as double flips.
Although the robotic insects have limitations compared to natural pollinators, researchers aim to enhance their flight precision and ability to take off and land on flowers. With further development, these robots could eventually achieve autonomous flight outside the lab.
That's all we have for now from Baku. Thank you for tuning in and keep watching AnewZ.